Once upon a time, beside a quiet lake surrounded by tall, whispering poplar trees, a mother duck was nestled deep in the reeds. She had made her nest on a tiny islet in the heart of the lake, far from the bustling farm and noisy animals. The water shimmered in the sunlight, birds sang in the trees, and the wind gently rustled the leaves. It was the perfect place to raise a family. The mother duck was full of anticipation. Beneath her, 7 large eggs lay in a soft bed of feathers and dried grass. She dreamed of the day her ducklings would hatch and follow her in a cheerful line through the water, their tiny beaks quacking with joy. Days passed slowly, and the mother duck waited with patience and hope in her heart. Then, one morning, soft tapping sounds came from inside the eggs. One by one, they began to crack open, and tiny beaks pushed through. 6 ducklings soon tumbled out, each one yellow and fluffy, peeping loudly and stumbling about on wobbly legs. They looked just as the mother had imagined, bright, cheerful, and full of life. But one egg remained. It was larger than the others and did not crack right away. The mother duck grew concerned, but at last, a faint crack appeared. With effort, the final duckling emerged. He was not yellow and soft like his siblings. His feathers were a dull, ashy gray, his body was plump and awkward, and he moved clumsily as he tried to stand. The other ducklings stared at him. Something about him was different, and they didn't like it. As the days went by, the 6 yellow ducklings grew more active and began to tease their gray sibling. They called him names, laughed at the way he walked, and excluded him from their games. Even other animals in the yard joined in. A snooty old goose waddled by one day and loudly said, "Such lovely ducklings. All except that ugly one. You ought to get rid of him, Mrs. Duck." The mother duck felt hurt by their cruelty but stood firm. "He may be different, but he is my child. I'm sure he'll grow into something special." But the gray duckling could feel the eyes and hear the whispers. He grew quiet and withdrawn, walking with his head low, trying not to be noticed. The taunts followed him everywhere. At the water's edge, in the yard, near the trees, he was always the ugly duckling. One day, he couldn't take it any longer. While his brothers and sisters played, he slipped away into the reeds and disappeared into the wild. Alone and unsure of where to go, the duckling wandered along the edge of the lake, past tall grasses and whispering trees. When he looked at his reflection in the water, all he saw was a chubby, gray, miserable figure staring back. As he walked beside the water, he came upon a group of wild ducks swimming peacefully. They were different from the ducks he had known and gray like him, but strong and fast. The duckling cautiously approached, expecting ridicule, but instead, the wild ducks welcomed him warmly. They didn't care what he looked like. He swam with them for a while, finally feeling a little less alone. But the peaceful days didn't last. Autumn came, and the wind began to blow colder. The wild ducks prepared to fly south for the winter. When they took to the sky, the duckling was left behind. He was too small and weak to follow. As the days shortened and the trees lost their leaves, loneliness returned. The duckling tried to survive on his own, hiding in the brush, eating what scraps he could find. One bitter night, the wind howled and snow began to fall. The duckling, cold and trembling, huddled under a bush, barely able to keep his eyes open. The next morning, a kind-hearted farmer was walking through the snow when he saw the tiny gray figure curled up in the cold. He gently picked up the duckling, wrapped him in a warm wool blanket, and carried him home. Inside the farmer's cottage, it was warm and full of life. A fire crackled in the hearth. The farmer's children were delighted with their new guest, feeding him crumbs and stroking his soft feathers. The duckling finally began to feel safe again. But the peace was shattered when the children began to play a game of hunters and prey. One of them pointed a toy arrow at him and shouted, pretending to shoot. Panic took over. The duckling flapped his wings wildly and flew out an open window, escaping into the icy outdoors once more. He ran through deep snow, barely able to move. He found a small cave and crawled inside, where it was dark, damp, and full of whistling bats. All winter long, he stayed hidden, listening to the wind and waiting for the world to change. Then, slowly, the sun began to return. Days grew longer and warmer. Flowers began to bloom and ice melted from the lake. The duckling emerged from the cave, stronger now, and wandered back toward the water. He swam quietly in the still lake, feeling the breeze on his feathers. One morning, he saw something that made him stop, a group of magnificent swans gliding across the water. Their feathers were snow white, their necks long and curved like silk ribbons, and they moved with grace and elegance. The duckling watched them in awe, his heart aching with longing. He turned to swim away before they could notice him. But one of the swans called out, "Why are you swimming away? Come join us." The duckling hesitated. "You don't want me," he said quietly. "I'm ugly. I don't belong with birds as beautiful as you." The swan smiled. "Look at your reflection." The duckling glanced down at the still water and gasped. Staring back at him was not a gray, awkward creature. It was a tall, beautiful white swan with glowing feathers and a proud, elegant form. He blinked, unsure if it was a dream. The other swan swam to his side and welcomed him joyfully. He spread his wings and felt their strength, the way they caught the wind and lifted him with ease. He joined the swans, gliding across the lake with pride. Soon, a group of children came to the lake's edge and pointed excited. "Look! There's a new swan! And he might be the most beautiful one of all." The young swan's heart swelled with happiness. For the first time in his life, he felt loved, accepted, and proud of who he was. He had suffered and waited, but now he understood. He had never been ugly, he had just been growing into something beautiful. From that day on, he never forgot what it was like to feel alone, and whenever he saw another creature who didn't fit in, he swam beside them and said gently, "You are special too. Just wait, your time will come."